It was the late summer of 2011. I had just finished my day's worth of playing outside, and had just arrived at our local GameStop to pick up a few new titles for my PlayStation 2. Next to all of the nicer 7th generation console games was the wall and bargain bin of PS2 titles, where I would begin my rummaging around and find whatnot to bring home. Among the copious amounts of sports games and shovelware was a title I had not seen before and looked interesting. It was Pirates of the Caribbean: The Legend of Jack Sparrow. I took it to the register and begged my mother to get it for me. The clerk put it in the case, and off I was to my house. Getting home, I opened the case, put it in the console, and realized that I had been scammed. The screenshots on the back of the box didn't look anything like what I was seeing on my TV. How could GameStop do this to me? I played it for about 2 minutes, and I, still pissed off, put it back into the case, onto the shelf, and forgot about it. It's now current day, 2022, and I noticed this game again. I took it out, put it in the PS2 once again, and gave it another go. This is a review for Pirates: Legend of the Black Buccaneer. So yeah, I got scammed and got this game instead of what was advertised, but I'm not actually that mad. But for real, GameStop, you scammed me, and that's a shitty business practice. While the game on the front of this box is completely different and often well regarded, the actual game I got is a sort of hidden gem from what I can tell. The game's actual box suggests lots of attacks, puzzles, and questing. I was hooked. Let's delve into this. There were several developers of this game, and from what I can tell, this was a collective effort. Not one studio seemed to be heading this, as I can't find any evidence that suggests who the lead developer was. I'm fairly certain Widescreen developed it and Valcon published it, as that's what the title screen says, but I'm still unsure. Valcon Games, founded in 2005, has had a laundry list of games developed, none of which seem to have any decent information about them. Their latest title was Adventures of Shuggy, an XBLA title, but have seemed to have gone defunct in recent years, as they have made no advancements since. Widescreen Games, founded in 2002, had only 6 games developed before going bankrupt in 2009 and closing. There are practically no games worth talking about here, aside from Dead to Rights 2. Tentacle Studios, founded in 2003, had only a handful of games with no significant titles to speak of other than Outcast, until claiming insolvency in 2008. However, their website to this day has still been up, assuming one of the employees is paying for website hosting. And last but not least, Capital Atlantic. This company has been the most elusive, as no search I made on Google or even Moby Games turned up even an inkling as to who they were. I mean, Jesus, I think I looked for a solid hour and found jack shit. I eventually found out through alternative searches using the names on the title screen, I think Capital Atlantic was actually Atlantic AAA Capital Game Fonds, a German game production and logistics company. From what I can tell based off of the multiple investment websites I found, they are still somewhat active, but do not seem to put their name on anything these days. Finally getting into the meat of the game, let's talk about its music. Black Buccaneer starts up with some really odd tribal jingling. But that's when the game actually starts. Most of the music is actually really nice to listen to, and as a bonus, each level has its own unique music. Not one area is the exact same with another's music. Not all of it is a true winner, and some of it can get downright annoying or forgettable, but what's there I consider to be very good. The story of Black Buccaneer is pretty damn boring, as it's more or less tacked onto the final product, but it's there if you want it. The story follows the journey of Francis Blade, a rogue pirate who has come to this island in search of wealth, owned by the infamous Laborn, an escaped slave pirate warlord who now protects the island from outside intruders using her voodoo magic. Every person who had come to the island before Francis had died on the way there or gotten far enough to see the gold, but had been killed trying to leave. There is a lot that the game leaves in the way of being explained, but to be frank, I could care less about some of the game's lore being missing. The graphics in this game for 2006 even, I think still hold up fairly well in today's climate, and I wouldn't have been shocked if this were an early Xbox 360 title. It managed to maintain 60 FPS during my 6.5 hour playthrough of the game. The gameplay I've recorded was upscaled 6 times internally while I played this on PCSX2. There was a PC port of this game, but it doesn't like to play nice with modern systems and outright refuses to install on my computer. Upscaling was the only option, but I'm not going to be buggered about it considering how well it looks even for a PS2 game. The art style looks gritty and realistic, but manages to stay reserved, only letting the most important things at that moment stick out. Sometimes things due to the way they were drawn did look a little too well hidden, but this was oftentimes not an issue for me. Most environments tended to look incredibly varied, and not one area to me just seemed to be slapped together like they ran out of time. The controls for this game are actually fairly simple, and are easy to pick up and play at any time. Square and triangle are used for your melee attacks, which when pressed in certain sequences can create a multitude of different attacks. L1 brings up the pistol, which auto-locks to the nearest enemy, so there is no fuss about aiming it in the heat of a battle. Pressing square when the pistol is out fires the weapon. Then it triggers a small cooldown before the gun can be fired again. If you have the throwable unlocked, you can also press circle while the gun is out to throw it. Cross makes Francis roll if he is moving, and jump if he is stationary. Circle blocks, pushes objects, and interacts with the world. The other shoulder buttons are not used all that much, save for later, I'll explain it in a bit. Clicking in both sticks changes Francis into the Black Buccaneer, but only if you have already acquired the amulet to do so. Buccaneer Mode has you using the largest sword I have ever seen to decimate your enemies, which refills your life meter but at the cost of your transformation meter. Francis cannot change back into the Buccaneer until this meter is full, and it is charged by attacking enemies as Francis. When platforming, the game seems to go into a special mode that always makes the cross button jump or pick himself up when hanging off a ledge. Not only this, but the circle button makes Francis hang or drop from a ledge. It all sounds complicated, but it's actually very easy to understand once you start to play it. The gameplay is like, how do I describe it? It's like Prince of Persia and Dark Souls had a child and this was the offspring. The combat is fairly easy to get a hold of, and at first it seems like a button masher, but in later stages, this is a dumbass move and will get you killed a lot. So unless you are a fucking dunce, dodging with the roll is almost essential. At first it seems like just spamming the Buccaneer is the easiest way to win, but if you do that, you'll just run your meter dry and then you'll be helpless when at low health. You'll only want to save him for when Francis is near death. Speaking of dying, when Francis dies, you have the option to load your last save or spend offerings to put him right back. You collect offerings by defeating enemies, and since there's no shortage of them, you'll be gathering lots of them. When spending offerings on instant respawns, the value of respawning and saving to an altar goes up each time, but there is an issue with this. You will always have too many offerings, and the whole mechanic ends up being totally pointless, which is a shame. Were it to work, it would add some urgency not to die, but it's totally negligible if you aren't complete dog shit at the game. However, you are not limited to using offerings on saves or respawns. They are also used for upgrading meters, getting new abilities, and other such purchases. While these do take a significant portion of what you have, even still this ends up with you having a boatload of offerings. As you explore each area, you find numerous areas you cannot go to at the moment, or areas that progress the story, such as when you find Vanilla de la Cruz, the daughter of the last Crusader, to fight Laborn. However, these story events are few and far between. While progressing, you will find these fire portals called Jinin doors, and there are two types. Ones that fast travel, and ones that give you vital abilities to progress the game. I think it's pretty obvious which one you want. If you do end up playing the game, I'll save you a bit of trouble. Here's the map. You can see what looks like a compass at the center, but those star points actually show you where the fast travel Jinin doors are. So if you just skip them, you will be able to find them all without much trouble. During my playthrough, I kept accidentally going through the travel doors, and it added about an extra half hour to my playtime, and pissed me off whenever I realized it contained no powers. The puzzles in each section of the game were all, to be brutally honest, just boring. Certainly not the reason you'd pick up and play this. They suffer from just being too damn simple and not challenging enough. There were two puzzles I ran into that I thought were impossible, but it turns out they were just bugged, which I'll explain in a second. The platforming in this game is just as involved as the combat, if a little bit less so. There are some sections with practically no platforming and lots of combat, and vice versa. There's more that the game has to offer, but I won't spoil it for you guys. I recommend you go and try it out for yourself. Now that I'm done praising the game, I'm gonna tell you why some of it just makes me want to stab myself in the eyes with a spoon over and over again. For starters, some of the platforming in this game is just total fucking hot garbage. Oftentimes during the Jinin door segments, there will be combat alongside some platforming, which would be normal, but in this situation, the platforms are timed to fall, move, or are so small you will most likely miss them on the first jump. This doesn't sound that bad on paper, but during the latter half of the game, I was racking up my respawn tab just because I was failing the platforming. And it certainly doesn't help that Francis sometimes just magnetizes to overhangs or platforms that I wasn't even aiming for! Another thing is a bug that some other players found, but I was not able to reproduce. The game will start to emit a high-pitched hum and will not go away until a reset or load of a save. Just a real quick side note here, I actually wrote this segment before I got permission to use this, but now I do, so... The other player I was talking about was Zero Master. Here's the little segment from their video. Thanks for letting me use it, dude.
There's actually a glitch I encountered twice, and I wasn't even trying to activate it. Back when I first played the game a few years ago, I came across a glitch where a high-pitched buzzing noise would play constantly. The sound would stop when I paused, but as soon as I unpaused, it was back. The only way to get rid of the sound was by saving and reloading my save.
You can also check out his channel in the description if you want. The enemies are also a bit of a problem. The variety of of enemies you will get will not change that much until you've completed about 80% of the game, and it can get a bit tedious shooting monkeys and dueling zombie pirates over and over again. Third, some of the abilities you can buy at altars are basically a direct downgrade or completely useless. The zombie summon, for example, barely does any damage to foes and manages to drain your life meter while it exists, so why would you even bother? Fourth, I managed to softlock my game a couple times because the game broke some puzzles and made them unsolvable. And before you say, hey Cynthius, why didn't you just play on real hardware? I did, and it still happened. And if you just want to beat the game, you need to near 100% it. And you know one of the worst things about it all? The copious and fucking copious amounts of backtracking. I swear to God, the amount of backtracking in this game is just inexcusable. I get that the point of the travel doors is to make this less horrendous, but even with them, you can't just go wherever you want because you still need to beat half of the game in order to even use half of the fast travel portals. So here I am walking around the same spots that I already cleared like I've got a stick up my ass only because I'm trying to get to the other side of the map. If only there were a few more junctions, this would not have been as bad as I make it out to be. You know, to be honest, I don't even think the backtracking is that bad. You just have to be patient. But this has got remnants of a late 90s game in it, where it does not hold your hand at all, and you just need to sit down, shut up, and figure it out for yourself. God! Look, this game is not perfect, and I wish that some of these problems just didn't affect the experience for me, but that won't flat out ruin it for me. To give it a mediocre rating of 6 or 7 out of 10 would just be doing this game and its devs a disservice. I strongly recommend this game to anyone who can pick it up. If you like simpler combat with an emphasis on dodging, you will really like this game. If you can't stand games like that, first of all, why the hell did you even bother watching the video? But other than that, you probably won't like this game. This is my verdict. I give it a solid 8.5 out of 10. It's got its issues, but I truly think this could be a classic in anyone's library.